So Airfix are known for releasing a Spitfire or two, and the community basically goes,
"You're joking. Not another one? Oh, for God's sake, I can't stand this."
But how many have they actually released? Or in particular, how many are new toolings? Let's go through the history of the Spitfire from Airfix. So, since the 1950s, Airfix have released, or shall I say tooled, 22 different Spitfires. And that includes the Seafire, which is basically Sea Spitfire, but shortened. That's what they kind of named it. And there were 2 decades where they didn't even tool a new Spitfire. They just released what they had. But we're going to go through every decade and just see when the tooling was made and how many times they released it. I will be using the Almanac of Scale Modelling, our own encyclopedia, or shall I say Wikipedia, of everything scale modelling. Scalemates. Now, there are errors in the history of the Spitfire. So, if you know of the errors, will you leave them in the comments below? I've picked up on a couple that I've seen, but I'm basing all this information, or basically the research on this video, from that website, okay? Also, go back through the comments after you've watched the video and just see what other people have written, and you can either disagree or agree. That's the best thing about this, is that you can go down through the comments and see what other people have written about on the whole, it's pretty accurate, but on certain things, there are some things that don't quite line up in time. So let's go back to 1955 with the original, the OG of Spitfires, Series 1 in 1/72 scale. And this one caused a bit of controversy because it was a mixture of a Mark 1 and a Mark 5, I think it was, but it never had the designation BTK. It was made up, and there was some faults with the tooling, and even though on Scalemates, I think there's a bit of an error. I've been told this from my latest videos of rare kits from Airfix, but in fact it was in 1955. They're saying that this tooling was released on numerous occasions right the way up until 2000, when they did an anniversary boxing of this kit. But I've now been told that they only released it 4 times. In 1955 in bags, and then they repackaged them in between that throughout the year, and then the last time it was released was around 1957 to 1958, when they tooled a new one, which was the Submarine Spitfire Mark 9 in 1/72 scale. And that tooling did really well. It was then released in 1967, right the way through until 2005, roughly. 10 times they released it with new packaging and added new parts to it. And that pretty much sums up the 1950s for Airfix and the start of the love affair and the romance of tooling Spitfires. But it wasn't until in 1970 where they realised they could go big, and they didn't go for another 1/72 scale Spitfire. They thought they would go even bigger. Airfix pulled out the 1/24 scale Spitfire Mark 1A, which is now a firm classic in the Airfix range. And they also released that kit 16 times throughout the decades. Sometimes as a model set, sometimes as a new with new parts. And then finally back in 2020, it was added to the Airfix Hall of Fame. It was reboxed in the original box art and given the decal scheme that it originally had, and put within the Airfix Vintage Classic range of kits. And what a worthy place for retirement for that to go. Because when you talk to people, it's still a pretty good kit, even though it's 50 years old now. Then 50 years ago in 1975, Airfix released the iconic Spitfire Mark 5B in 1/72nd scale. And I think for my generation, that was the Spitfire we all built. That 5B was released about 16 times. And the last time it was released was back in 2013 when they produced it with new parts and made it an Airfix Club Edition and named that Under the Red Star. And that was it then. We never saw that 5B reboxed again. And if there is a kit that deserves to be in that Airfix Hall of Fame, it'd be this one. You know, I know it's been released numerous times, but if Airfix could rebox that with the original box art, the decal scheme, and put it in their vintage classic range, that would be a seller, I'm sure, because I think a lot of us built that 5B first, even before the Mark 1A. Yeah, just putting it out there, Airfix. 1977 was a big year for Airfix because they embarked on a new journey into a new scale, and they released in 1/48 scale the Spitfire 5B alongside the Mosquito. It was then released 16 times, not including the twice released kit in a Hellerboxing. And then in 2013, it was last released again as an Airfix Club package. So you would get it free with your club membership. And they released it as a Spitfire Mark 9 with Egyptian or Israeli decals for this. It was quite a lovely scheme. There was two really good schemes in this kit. And we've not seen it since. In 1978, Airfix tooled a 1/72nd scale Spitfire Mark 1, and they went away from the old cardboard and bagged packaging. They went for this cardboard bubble plastic, like a harder plastic to protect the kits more. Now this tooling must have been made of titanium or something, because it was released another 23 times after that first release, right up until 2009 when its last release was a starter set, and that was the last time we saw that Mark 1 released. Hi, just jumping in here whilst I'm editing this video to ask a bit of a favour. If you're enjoying the content on this channel and are not yet a subscriber, will you please consider becoming a subscriber? All you have to do is click subscribe, and if you ring that bell, click all, you will be notified when I release a new video. Thumbs up always helps with the channel, and if you have any questions or any suggestions on these Spitfires, and maybe I've got some errors or I'm factually correct on some things, just leave them in the comments box below, because that also helps the algorithm and boost the channel. Anyways, thanks for listening to that. Let's get back to the video. That was the 70s. Moving on to the 80s, there was no new tooling of Spitfires from Airfix. Nothing was coming out the factory new, but it was in fact 18 years later in 1996 when Airfix announced two new tooled Spitfires. Airfix announced in 1/48 scale a Supermarine Spitfire F22/24, and they released it 6 times in total until 2018, where they released it one last time with fresh decals as the F Mark 22/24 with the Hong Kong Auxiliary Air Force scheme. This was also the year of their first Seafire in 1/48 scale, the FR 46/47. It's only been released twice. The final time of its release was in 2012 and came with Royal Naval Fleet Air Arm schemes, which must mean that that's due for a re-release anytime soon. So into the noughties, Airfix released 3 Spitfires at this point. It was in 2007 when they tooled a Spitfire Mark 1 in 1/48 scale, again bigger scale. The scale mates are saying that this was only released 3 times. One in 2007, then 2010, where they produced the Mark 1, the Mark 1A and the Mark 2A from this kit. And then they added new parts, or they added new decals and created a Spitfire Mark 5A, but also as a gift set with paints, the glues and brushes. So I'm not too sure about this 148 Spitfire. Again, using scale mates as a reference point on this. And then in 2009, it was a dual year for Airfix and Spitfire releases. They announced Spitfire Mark 9C in 1/72 scale, which again was only released twice, because the second time it was released in 2014 with a new scheme, and that was it. So 10 years later, will we see this one again in the Airfix range? They're releasing a 9E, so I'm not too sure. Also that year was the Supermarine Spitfire PR19. Once in a fighter collection after that first initial release, and then again in 2017, this 1/72 scale Spit. Just as an aside, it does say this was designed and manufactured in the UK. So was this one of the last Spitfires until the 124th Spitfire to be made and manufactured in the UK? Let me know in the comments, because I'm unsure about that. Right, moving on to 2010 to 2019, so the last decade, and Airfix didn't disappoint. 7 Spitfires were released that decade. 1 Seafire was thrown in the mix, but basically 1/72 scale and 148. Just as an aside here, they actually released Spitfires 50 different ways. So they had 50 boxings of Spitfire, whether it was like a dogfight double, it was in a set, a gift set or a model set. They did 50, but that's less than the previous decade, 2000 to 2009, where they released 63. So you can see why people often say when Airfix do an announcement, they say, oh, not another Spitfire. But like I said, it's Spitfires do sell, and Airfix love their Spitfires, and really deep down in my heart, I like a Spitfire too. So in 2010, they announced a new 1/72 scale Spitfire Mark 1A, and this has become their bread and butter. If you get a starter set, the Spitfire one from Aldi or Lidl, this would be the plastic that was in that box. And they've released it 17 times right up to last year when they put in a new decal scheme for it. But yes, if you've built one of these Spitfires from Aldi or Lidl, I'm pretty much sure that will be the plastic that's inside the box. It's their bog standard Spitfire kit now. I would have thought the Mark 5C would have moved into that position, but at the moment, that's the one that's basically their bread and butter. A year later, in 2011, they tooled a new 148 Supermarine Spitfire Mark 12. And this kit has only been released twice. Then they released it with new decals back in 2022. In 2011, they announced and released a 148 Supermarine Seafire F17. Again, only been released twice, and the second time it was released in 2023 with new decals. In 2012, they released this Spitfire F Mark 22 in 1/72 scale, and that's only had 2 releases as well. The last time we had seen this one with new decals was back in 2022. In 2013, they tooled a 148 Supermarine Spitfire PR19 in 148 scale. They've announced they're going to be releasing this model kit again this year, so this will be the second time it's been released, and this time it's going to have new schemes. And look at that box art with the English Electric Lightning in the background. Fantastic. I like this box art because there's a story behind it that they did use the PR19 back in the day to develop their skills with the English Electric Lightning. So hats off to Airfix for bringing out that scheme. 2014 now, and another Spitfire Mark 5B was tooled and released, and they've got their money's worth out of this one already because it has been tooled 7 times. One of those times, 2015, they released it as part of the Airfix Club membership pack, and you got this tooling, and they boxed it as specialist Spitfires, which is pretty nice. But they're releasing this tooling again this year, but as a Spitfire Mark 1. So if you're interested in this kit, you can go and pre-order it off the Airfix website now. Then the final release of this decade was another 148 Submarine Spitfire, but it was the FR Mark 14, which has had 3 releases, and the third one was in 2022 with new parts, where they created the Mark 18 in 148 scale. But you may remember this kit more from 2020 when they released it as the Mark 14 civilian scheme, with that red and that white go faster stripe right down the middle of it. I've seen quite a few at scale model shows built in that scheme, so I'm assuming that was a very popular scheme for that tooling. Right, finally, we're now in this decade, so 2020 onwards to the last 5 years. Now, according to ScaleMates, there's only 3 Spitfires that have been tooled in this decade, but that's wrong. There's 4. And I think there's a problem with how they're linked to other Spitfire kits, and I'll explain as I go along. So, Pramjit, legendary designer at Airfix, this was his first tool that he designed for Airfix, which is this one, the Spitfire Mark 5C. So in 2020, he came along and this was released, and it's fantastic. Now, they've re-released this in 2022 with new schemes, and that's now available on the Airfix website. Now, at the same time, he designed a starter set, which is this one here, the Submarine Spitfire Mark 5C. Okay, so you can see there might be a bit of confusion, but the starter set is not this. Okay, this one has 73 parts. This one only has 26, and Pramjit was the designer who came up with the idea, I believe, looking at the video that they put out, of the shadow stand. Brilliant. So this is a release also from 2020, and then I think it was 2023 or 2024 when they released this limited edition Visit Blackpool Illuminations release, which is the Mark 5, also with 26 parts. So you can see there's a little bit of confusion. That starter set was also released alongside the F-35B Lightning starter set, and they created the then and now model set, which came with paints, glues, and you could build the Spitfire and the Lightning. Both starter sets with very minimal parts. And one other release was the Messerschmitt and Spitfire Dogfight Double, also tooled with this starter set. And that's where the confusion lies on ScaleMate. So if you are able to edit that, and also they've linked the PR19 with that as well. So if you go onto ScaleMates, you can see it there. If you can somehow do your jiggery pokery, then it will then make the search results correct that there were actually 4 Spitfires released in this decade. And then we had the epic release of the brand new 1/24 scale new tooled Submarine Spitfire Mark 9C, which was then released 2 years later in 2024 as the Mark 8. And now this year, future tooling from Airfix is the Submarine Spitfire Mark 9E in 148. And also this year will be a trainer Spitfire 2-seater, first time ever in 148 scale. TR9, based off that 9, I believe, but they keep saying it's a new tooling, but whether it's new parts or new tooling, I'm unsure. And that is the last Spitfire they've tooled. So throughout this whole video, you would have seen 22 new tooled Spitfires from Airfix. They've done 10 1/72 scales, 10 1/48 scales, and 2 1/24 scales Spitfires. If you go on ScaleMates and search Airfix Spitfire, it will come up with 221 different search results. 221. That is a big number. But yeah, 221 times Airfix have released Spitfire in some sort of model set, gift set, new release with decals and schemes, new parts, and even including the little mini kits that they brought out twice, which were 1:100 scale pre-painted model kits that you could just put together. Yeah, I didn't mention them because they're not actually Airfix tooling. I think they got them from a company in Japan that was releasing them. But yes, that is a lot of scale model kits. I've tried to go through as many as I can, keeping to the new toolings so you can see. And really, there hasn't been that many toolings from Airfix. 22 over 80 years. And just think about it. In 1955, Airfix tooled and released their first Spitfire, and 75 years later they're releasing another one at 148, which I'm really excited for. It's on my pre-order list. Just some thoughts there for you, and I think that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. It's been an absolute delight to research. I think I've spent 9 hours filming and editing this video to try and make a concise history of the relationship between Airfix and the Spitfire. If you've enjoyed this video, please click like. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe, ring that bell, click all to be notified when I release a new video. Huge shout out to the channel members who financially helped me with this channel. If you'd like to become a channel member, please click join below and select which membership tier you so wish. We have a Thursday night live stream where we work off our benches, we talk about scale modelling, we talk about new releases, technique, and it's become a lovely little community. And there are other perks as well for becoming a channel member. In one of the four corners will be a video or a playlist of other content on my channel. And again, thank you for watching and have a fabulous rest of your week. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.